Have you ever wondered what America looked like before the skyscrapers and sprawling suburbs? Long before the first European settlers arrived, this land was home to incredibly advanced civilizations, each with its own rich and sophisticated architectural traditions. This isn't a story about primitive huts. It's a story about innovation, community, and a deep connection to the earth. Let's journey back in time and explore the brilliant architecture of North America's first peoples. Their buildings weren't just shelters. They were masterpieces of design, perfectly adapted to their environments, cultures, and spiritual beliefs. From the sun-baked deserts of the Southwest to the dense forests of the East, indigenous builders created structures that were sustainable, functional, and beautiful. Our first stop is the American Southwest, a region known for its dramatic landscapes and intense climate. Here, groups like the ancestral Puebloans, the Hohokam, and the Mogollon built some of the most impressive structures on the continent. You've probably heard of pueblos, but what exactly are they? Imagine multi-story apartment complexes made from adobe, a natural building material crafted from sun-dried bricks of clay, sand, and straw. These pueblos were architectural marvels. Take Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. At its peak, this massive, D-shaped structure had over 600 rooms and stood several stories high. It was the heart of a thriving community. The thick adobe walls were a form of ancient air conditioning. They absorbed the sun's heat during the day, keeping the interiors cool, and then slowly released that heat at night, providing warmth when the desert temperatures dropped. This is a principle that modern sustainable architects are still studying today. Many of these structures were also built directly into cliff faces, like the famous Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde, Colorado. This wasn't just for protection. It was a strategic use of the natural landscape. Building into the rock provided shelter from the elements and a strong defensive position. The layout of these communities, with their central plazas and interconnected rooms, was designed to foster a strong sense of community, cooperation, and shared living. Every aspect, from the placement of a window to the width of a doorway, was carefully considered. Now, let's travel north to the vast, open expanse of the Great Plains. Life here was very different. Many tribes, such as the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot, were nomadic, their lives revolving around the great bison herds. Their architecture had to be as mobile as they were. The solution? The iconic teepee. The teepee is a masterpiece of portable engineering. Far from being a simple tent, its design is incredibly sophisticated. It starts with a frame of long, straight wooden poles, often lodgepole high, arranged in a cone shape. This framework was then covered with expertly stitched bison hides. A single teepee cover could require 10 to 20 hides, a testament to the skill of the women who prepared and sewed it. What makes the teepee so brilliant is its climate control. The cone shape is inherently stable, able to withstand the powerful winds that sweep across the plains. At the top, a set of smoke flaps could be adjusted with long poles to direct airflow. This created a natural chimney, allowing smoke from the central fire to escape while drawing in fresh air from below. This kept the inside warm and smoke-free, even in the dead of winter. The teepee was lightweight enough to be packed up and moved by horse or dog travois in a matter of hours, yet sturdy enough to provide a comfortable home. It was the perfect architectural response to a life on the move. Heading east, we enter the eastern woodlands, a region of dense forests and abundant rivers. Here, tribes like the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, developed a completely different style of building, the longhouse. And when they said long, they meant it. These structures could stretch for over 100 feet, some even reaching the length of a football field. Built from a frame of wooden poles and covered in sheets of bark, typically from the elm tree, the longhouse was a communal dwelling. It wasn't home to just one family, but to an entire clan, with multiple related families living together under one roof. Inside, the space was divided into compartments, with a central aisle running down the length of the building. Shared hearths were spaced along this aisle, providing warmth and a place to cook for the families on either side. The longhouse was more than just a building. It was a powerful symbol of their society. It represented the unity and shared identity of the clan. In fact, the Iroquois Confederacy, a political alliance of 6 different nations, often referred to itself metaphorically as the people of the Longhouse. This shows how deeply their architecture was woven into their social and political fabric. The longhouse was a physical manifestation of their core values: cooperation, community, and collective strength. Finally, let's journey to the Pacific Northwest coast, a land of towering forests and a dramatic coastline. The resources here were different, and so was the architecture. Indigenous communities like the Haida, Tlingit, and Kwakwaka'wakw had access to massive cedar trees, and they became master woodworkers. Their signature structure was the plank house. These were large, rectangular homes built from massive cedar planks and heavy timber frames. Some plank houses were enormous, capable of housing dozens of people. But what truly sets them apart is the artistry. The supporting posts and house facades were often intricately carved with designs representing family lineages, crests, and important spiritual stories. These weren't just decorations. They were a form of visual storytelling, a library of a family's history and cultural identity carved into their very home. Massive totem poles often stood in front of the houses, further declaring the status and history of the family within. The plank house was a fusion of shelter, art, and cultural archive. It demonstrated a profound mastery of woodworking and a deep understanding of how architecture could be used not just to house bodies, but to nourish a culture and preserve its history for generations to come. Across all these diverse regions, a common thread unites indigenous architecture: sustainability. Long before green architecture became a buzzword, these builders were masters of it. They used locally sourced, natural materials with immense respect and efficiency. Their designs worked in harmony with the environment, rather than trying to dominate. Buildings were oriented to take advantage of the sun for warmth, the wind for ventilation, and the natural landscape for protection. This approach reflects a worldview where humans are part of the natural world, not separate from it. Every structure, from the humble teepee to the magnificent pueblo, was a testament to a deep, accumulated knowledge of climate, geography, and the local ecosystem. So, the next time you think about American architecture, remember that its story didn't begin with colonial brick houses or steel skyscrapers. It began thousands of years ago with the brilliant innovators and master builders of North America's First Nations. Their legacy is not just in the ancient ruins we can still visit today, but in the timeless principles they perfected: community-focused design, environmental harmony, and the idea that a building can be so much more than just a shelter. It can be a home, a story, a symbol, and a connection to the land itself. Thanks for joining us on this journey through America's foundational architecture. If you found this as fascinating as we do, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. When you picture early America, what kind of houses come to mind? In New England, English settlers built simple, sturdy homes designed to survive harsh winters. These houses were typically made of wood, with steeply pitched roofs to shed snow and large central chimneys to provide warmth. Decoration was minimal, reflecting the Puritan values of simplicity and function. In the Middle Colonies, including present-day New York and Pennsylvania, architecture reflected cultural diversity. Dutch colonial homes were common, featuring brick or stone construction and distinctive gambrel roofs. These buildings were practical yet durable, often built to last for generations. Further south, in the southern colonies, climate played a major role in design. Homes were built with wide porches, high ceilings, and large windows to improve airflow. Many southern houses were influenced by English country estates, but adapted to the warmer environment. In areas under Spanish control, such as Florida, Texas, and the Southwest, Spanish colonial architecture developed. These structures were made with thick stucco or adobe walls, red clay tile roofs, and interior courtyards. The designs helped keep interiors cool while offering protection and privacy. Across all regions, colonial architecture relied heavily on local materials. Wooden forested areas, brick and stone were available, and adobe in dry climates. Buildings were functional, durable, and closely tied to daily life, religion, and trade. Colonial architecture laid the groundwork for America's architectural identity. Though rooted in European traditions, these early structures evolved to meet the demands of a new land, setting the stage for the styles that would follow in the centuries ahead. When you picture early America, what kind of houses come to mind? Maybe a simple wooden cottage in New England, a brick house in a bustling port city, or a sprawling plantation in the South. The story of how these homes came to be is a fascinating tale of adaptation, survival, and the birth of a new American identity. It all starts in the 1600s, when European settlers began arriving on the shores of a new continent. They didn't just bring their belongings. They brought their building traditions, blueprints etched into their memories from England, the Netherlands, Spain, and beyond. But America was different. The climate was harsher, the materials were unfamiliar, and the challenges were brand new. They couldn't just copy and paste their old homes. They had to innovate. This fusion of old-world design and new-world necessity created something truly unique: American colonial architecture. Let's travel first to New England, a land of dense forests and brutal winters. English settlers, many of them Puritans, needed homes that were, above all, functional and resilient. Their values of simplicity and practicality were reflected in the houses they built. Think of the classic salt box or Cape Cod style. These homes were typically made of wood, the most abundant resource around. They featured simple, rectangular floor plans and steeply pitched roofs, a clever design to help heavy snow slide right off. Inside, life revolved around the central chimney. This massive brick or stone structure was the heart of the home, often with multiple fireplaces branching off into different rooms. It provided heat for warmth, fire for cooking, and light during the long, dark winters. Decoration was kept to a minimum. You wouldn't find much ornate carving or fancy trim. Instead, the beauty was in the craftsmanship and the honest use of materials. These were sturdy, no-nonsense homes built to endure, a perfect reflection of the people who lived inside them. Now, let's journey south to the Middle Colonies, a region we now know as New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. This area was a true melting pot of cultures, and its architecture shows it. Here, you'd find a vibrant mix of English, Dutch, German, and Swedish influences. In areas settled by the Dutch, like the Hudson Valley, a distinct style emerged. Dutch colonial homes were often built with brick and stone, materials that signaled permanence and prosperity. Their most iconic feature? The gambrel roof. This is a symmetrical two-sided roof with two slopes on each side, the lower slope being steeper than the upper one. This design wasn't just for looks. It created more usable space in the attic, almost like a full second story, making the home more spacious and practical. These buildings were durable and designed to be passed down through generations, a testament to the community's long-term vision. The blend of different European styles in the Middle Colonies created a rich architectural tapestry, unlike anywhere else in early America. Continuing our journey southward, we arrive in the Southern Colonies, places like Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. Here, the biggest challenge wasn't the cold, it was the heat and humidity. Architecture had to be designed for comfort in a sweltering climate. The solution was a style that embraced openness and airflow. Southern homes, often influenced by the grand country estates of the English gentry, were built to be breezy and cool. They featured high ceilings to allow hot air to rise, and large, numerous windows, often symmetrically placed to capture any available breeze. The most defining feature was the wide, welcoming porch or piazza. These covered outdoor spaces provided shade from the relentless sun and created a comfortable transition between the indoors and outdoors. They became central to Southern life, a place for socializing, relaxing, and escaping the afternoon heat. While they borrowed from European elegance, these homes were fundamentally redesigned for life in a much warmer world. But the English and Dutch weren't the only ones building. Let's head to the sun-baked landscapes of Florida, Texas, and the Southwest, areas under Spanish control. Here, a completely different architectural style took root, born from Spanish traditions and adapted to an arid environment. This is Spanish colonial architecture. The primary building materials were adobe, sun-dried mud bricks, or stucco over stone. The walls were incredibly thick, sometimes several feet, providing excellent insulation that kept the interiors cool during the day and warm at night. Roofs were covered with distinctive red clay tiles, which were durable and helped shed the infrequent but heavy rains. A key feature of Spanish colonial design was the interior courtyard. Homes and mission compounds were often built around a central, open-air patio. This private space offered protection from the elements and outsiders, and often included fountains or gardens, creating a cool, peaceful oasis in the dry climate. With their enclosed courtyards, limited exterior windows, and heavy, earth-tone materials, These buildings were fortresses of comfort against the harsh desert environment. Across all these diverse regions, one principle remained constant. Builders used what was available. In the vast forests of New England, wood was the natural choice. Where clay was abundant, like in Virginia or the Hudson Valley, brick became common. In rocky areas of Pennsylvania, stone was used. And in the dry Southwest, the earth itself, in the form of adobe, provided the building blocks. This reliance on local materials gave each region's architecture a distinct character, tying the buildings to the very land they stood on. These colonial structures were more than just shelters. They were the centers of daily life, workshops for trade, and places of worship. Their design was intertwined with the colonists' routines, their beliefs, and their connection to the community. From the rugged simplicity of a New England farmhouse to the airy elegance of a southern mansion, colonial architecture tells the story of early America. It shows how people from different backgrounds adapted to a new and often challenging land. They took the traditions they knew and transformed them, creating a style that was both rooted in the past and built for the future. These early buildings weren't just the foundation for future architectural styles. They were the physical embodiment of a new nation being carved out of the wilderness. Thanks for joining us on this architectural journey through early America. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories from history. See you next time. Chapter 3. Have you ever walked through an old American city and wondered about the stories behind those beautiful, historic buildings? The 1700s were a massive turning point for the American colonies, and you can see it written right on the walls of their architecture. Before this, buildings were mostly about survival. But as the colonies grew more prosperous and organized, a new sense of confidence began to emerge, giving rise to two iconic styles, Georgian and Federal. Let's start with the Georgian style, which dominated the scene from the early to mid-1700s. Named after the British kings George I through IV, this style was all about order, symmetry, and proportion. Imagine a classic brick building. The front door is perfectly centered, with an equal number of windows on either side, creating a beautiful, balanced facade. It's like the building is standing up straight and proud. Decorative elements like columns, pediments over the door, and elegant crown moldings added a touch of class. This wasn't just for show. It symbolized authority and stability. You'd see this style everywhere, in townhouses, churches, and important public buildings. Inside, the layout was just as formal. A central hallway would lead to clearly defined rooms, which mirrored the structured social hierarchy of the time. It was a world where everything had its place. But then, everything changed. The American Revolution wasn't just a political upheaval, it sparked a cultural one too. As the colonies fought for and won their independence, a new architectural style emerged that perfectly captured the spirit of the young nation, the Federal style. This style took the classical symmetry of Georgian architecture but made it lighter, more refined, and distinctly American. Think of it as Georgian architecture's more elegant, optimistic cousin. Federal buildings often had smooth surfaces, slender columns, and delicate details. One of the most recognizable features is the beautiful fanlight, a semicircular window right above the front door. You might also see graceful oval windows or even grand domes on public buildings. This style drew heavy inspiration from ancient Roman democracy, a fitting choice for a new republic. It was all about celebrating the ideals of freedom, unity, and refinement. You can find stunning examples of federal architecture in the early government buildings of Washington, D.C., and in the grand homes of Boston and Philadelphia. These buildings weren't just places to live or work, they were statements. They declared to the world that America was a new, independent nation with its own unique identity. So what does this all mean? The shift from Georgian to federal architecture tells a fascinating story. It's a journey from colonial subjects who admired British order to independent citizens forging their own path. The Georgian style reflects a society that valued stability and hierarchy under British rule. Its solid, symmetrical designs were a visual representation of order and control. Then, the federal style arrives, taking those classical ideas and infusing them with a new sense of lightness and optimism. It was the architectural language of a nation built on the ideals of democracy and liberty. Together, these two styles laid the groundwork for everything that came after in American architecture. They were the first to really move beyond pure function and start using buildings to tell a story, to express an identity, and to symbolize the values of a nation. They show us how architecture is so much more than just bricks and mortar. It's a reflection of who we are, where we've been, and where we hope to go. The next time you see a historic building, take a closer look. You might just be reading a chapter from America's story. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through architectural history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Chapter 4. Have you ever wondered why old buildings in America look the way they do? From grand government buildings to charming Victorian homes, the 19th century was a whirlwind of architectural creativity that shaped the look of the nation. Let us take a journey back in time to explore the amazing revival styles that defined an era of incredible change. The 19th century was a period of massive growth for the United States. The country was expanding westward, cities were booming, and new technologies like railroads and mass production were changing everything. This sense of ambition and new identity needed to be expressed, and what better way to do that than through architecture? As Americans looked to build a new future, they also looked to the past for inspiration, sparking a series of revival movements that reinterpreted classic European designs for a new world. First up, we have the Greek Revival style, which dominated the early to mid-1800s. Think of ancient Greek temples, and you've got the right idea. These buildings feature stately columns, triangular pediments above the entrance, and a sense of order and symmetry. Why Greece? Because the young American Republic saw itself as the heir to ancient Greek democracy and ideals. This is why you see Greek revival in so many government buildings, banks, and grand homes of the era. It was a powerful symbol of democracy, stability, and civic pride. It was architecture that said, "We are building something important and lasting here." But not everyone was looking to ancient Greece. At the same time, the Gothic revival style captured the American imagination. This style was all about drama, emotion, and a connection to the medieval past. You'll recognize it by its pointed arches, steep, sloping roofs, and intricate decorative stonework called tracery. It was the perfect style for churches and universities, aiming to inspire a sense of awe, spirituality, and reverence for tradition. It also found a home in the countryside, where Gothic cottages, with their gingerbread trim and romantic silhouettes, became incredibly popular. As the century moved into its middle decades, a new style arrived from across the Atlantic, Italianate. Inspired by the villas of the Italian Renaissance, this style was a bit more relaxed and picturesque. Key features include low-pitched roofs with wide, overhanging eaves supported by decorative brackets, and tall, narrow windows, often with arched tops. The Italianate style was incredibly versatile. It could be grand and imposing for a wealthy merchant's mansion, or more modest for a row house in a growing city. Its adaptability made it one of the most popular styles of its time, spreading rapidly across the country. Then came the Victorian era, a time when more is more became the unofficial motto of architecture. As the century progressed, designs became increasingly ornate and eclectic. The Victorian period isn't just one style, but a collection of them, including Queen and Second Empire. Think complex roof lines, asymmetrical layouts, wraparound porches, bay windows, and an explosion of color and texture. Thanks to industrialization, decorative elements like intricate woodwork and patterned shingles could be mass-produced in factories. This made elaborate designs more affordable and accessible than ever before. And how did all these styles travel so far and wide? 2 words, the railroad. Trains could transport not just people, but also building materials, pattern books, and even prefabricated parts to the furthest corners of the country. A builder in a small town in Ohio could now build a house in the latest Italianate style that was popular in New York City. This created a fascinating architectural landscape that was both unified in its trends and diverse in its local interpretations. By the end of the 19th century, American architecture was a vibrant tapestry of tradition and innovation. These revival styles weren't just about copying the past. They were about adapting it to tell a new story, a story of a nation growing, experimenting, and forging its own identity. They built the foundation, quite literally, for the modern architectural marvels that would follow. So next time you're walking through an older neighborhood, take a closer look at the buildings around you. You might just spot the columns of a Greek revival, the pointed arches of a Gothic revival, or the decorative brackets of an Italian at home. Each one is a piece of history, telling a story of America's ambitious and creative past. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at 19th century architecture, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time. Chapter 5. Picture this. It's the late 1800s, and American cities are bursting at the seams. Land is expensive, space is tight, and there's nowhere to go but up. This pressure cooker moment, fueled by new technology and soaring ambition, gave birth to one of America's most iconic symbols, the skyscraper. Before skyscrapers, buildings were held up by thick, heavy walls. The taller you built, the thicker the base had to be, which just wasn't practical. But then came a game-changing breakthrough, the steel frame structure. Imagine a building with a strong, metal skeleton. This steel frame could support all the weight, freeing buildings from the tyranny of massive walls. Suddenly, architects could design structures that were taller, lighter, and more open than ever before. The sky was literally the limit. Of course, a 10-story building isn't much use if you have to climb 10 flights of stairs. That's where another revolutionary invention came in, the elevator. With safe, reliable elevators, the upper floors went from being the least desirable to the most exclusive. Height was no longer a burden. It became a luxury, a status symbol. Now, the top floors offered the best views and the cleanest air, completely flipping the real estate market on its head. The story of the skyscraper really catches fire, no pun intended, in Chicago. After the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 devastated the city, it was a clean slate. Architects and engineers seized the opportunity to rebuild with new materials and radical ideas. This gave rise to the legendary Chicago School of Architecture. Their philosophy was simple but profound. Form follows function. They stripped away unnecessary ornamentation, focusing on clean lines, large windows for natural light, and celebrating the building's underlying structure. They weren't just building offices. They were creating a new, modern way of working and living. While Chicago was the birthplace, New York City quickly became the ultimate stage for skyscraper supremacy. It was a race to the top. Companies battled for prestige, each one trying to build a taller, more magnificent tower than the last. These soaring structures weren't just buildings. They were bold statements of power, progress, and corporate might. They were monuments to the American dream, visible for miles around, dominating the skyline and capturing the world's imagination. As we moved into the early 20th century, skyscraper design took on a glamorous new look. The Art Deco style emerged, and it was all about celebrating the modern age. Think of the Chrysler Building with its gleaming spire and geometric patterns. Art Deco skyscrapers featured strong vertical lines that drew your eyes upward, intricate details inspired by machines and speed, and a sense of theatricality. These weren't just functional buildings anymore. They were works of art, capturing the optimism and energy of the roaring 20s. The skyscraper completely transformed the American city. It concentrated commerce into dense, vertical downtowns, changing how people work, shop, and interact. It redefined urban planning and gave each city a unique, recognizable silhouette. The birth of the skyscraper was more than just an architectural milestone. It was a declaration of America's arrival on the world stage. It was a testament to innovation, a symbol of endless possibility, and the foundation for the incredible skylines that continue to inspire us today. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at architectural history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories behind the world we've built. See you in the next one. Chapter 6. Have you ever looked at a sleek, glass skyscraper or a house with huge windows and clean, simple lines and wondered where that style came from? It wasn't always like this. For centuries, buildings were often decorated with elaborate carvings and details, borrowing styles from ancient Greece or Rome. But in the early 20th century, something revolutionary happened in American architecture. A new movement called Modernism took hold, and it completely changed the way we build and live. Imagine a world buzzing with new technology, recovering from massive global conflicts, and undergoing huge social shifts. Architects felt that the buildings they designed should reflect this new, fast-paced era, not the past. They asked a simple but powerful question: what is a building really for? Their answer was that form should follow function. This became the core belief of modernism. Out went the heavy, fancy decorations, and in came simplicity, efficiency, and honesty. Modernist architects embraced new materials that were becoming widely available thanks to industrial progress. Steel, glass, and reinforced concrete weren't just for internal structures anymore. They became the stars of the show. These materials allowed for designs that were previously impossible: tall, slender towers with walls made almost entirely of glass, and wide-open interior spaces without the need for clunky support columns. The goal was to create buildings that were logical, practical, and served the needs of the people inside them. One of the most powerful expressions of this new thinking was the international style. As the name suggests, this was a look that transcended national borders. It arrived in the United States in the 1930s and brought with it a distinct set of rules: flat roofs, smooth, unadorned surfaces, and massive glass windows that blurred the line between inside and outside. Think of the iconic glass-box skyscrapers that began to define the skylines of cities like New York and Chicago. These buildings weren't just offices. They were symbols of a new corporate identity: efficient, forward-thinking, and powerful. They were designed to be rational and universally applicable, creating a consistent look from Chicago to Berlin to Tokyo. But not every modernist architect followed the same rigid formula. America's own Frank Lloyd Wright offered a different, more personal vision. He called his philosophy organic architecture. Wright believed that a building shouldn't just be placed on a piece of land, it should grow out of it. He sought to create harmony between human-made structures and the natural world. His famous designs, like the Falling Water House, literally integrate with their surroundings, using natural materials, long, horizontal lines that mimic the horizon, and flowing, open floor plans. Wright's approach brought a warmer, more human-centered feel to modernism, reminding us that even the most innovative designs should connect us to the earth. This modernist revolution didn't just stay in the big cities. It trickled down into the suburbs and reshaped the American home. After World War II, there was a surge of optimism and a desire for a new way of living. The traditional, boxy homes with small, separate rooms gave way to the open-concept floor plans we love today. Kitchens, dining areas, and living rooms flowed into one another, creating a more social and informal atmosphere. Large picture windows and sliding glass doors brought in more natural light and connected families to their backyards. The simplicity and affordability of modernist design made it perfect for the post-war housing boom, forever changing the look and feel of suburban America. By the 1960s, modernism and the international style had left an indelible mark on the American landscape. From towering skyscrapers to modest suburban homes, their principles of clarity, function, and innovation had become the dominant architectural language. The movement wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a reflection of a society that valued progress, efficiency, and a break from the past. And even today, as we walk through our cities and live in our homes, the legacy of these bold architectural pioneers is all around us, reminding us of a time when design dared to imagine a new future. Thanks for watching. If you found this look at architectural history interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories behind the world we've built. See you next time. Chapter 7. Have you ever looked at a modern building, all glass and steel, and thought, is that it? By the 1970s, a lot of people were thinking the same thing. The sleek, minimalist designs of modernism, once hailed as the future, started to feel a bit cold, a bit impersonal, and frankly, a little boring. Architects and critics began to question these strict rules. Was a building just a machine for living in, or could it be something more? This growing dissatisfaction sparked a revolution in design, postmodernism. This new movement threw the modernist rulebook out the window. It rejected the idea that buildings had to be purely functional and nothing else. Instead, it welcomed back everything modernism had kicked to the curb: history, color, decoration, symbolism, and even a sense of humor. Imagine architects suddenly getting to play with a full box of crayons after only being allowed to use black, white, and gray. So what did this actually look like? Well, architects started reintroducing elements from the past, but with a twist. You'd see classical columns, but maybe they were ridiculously oversized or painted in bright, unexpected colors. Arches and decorative patterns made a huge comeback, not as historical copies, but as playful nods to architectural history. Postmodernism wasn't about recreating the past. It was about sampling it, remixing it, and having fun with it. One of the biggest shifts was the move away from the one-size-fits-all, universal style of modernism. Postmodern buildings celebrated individuality and local character. An office building in Dallas could look totally different from one in Miami, reflecting the city's unique culture and history. Instead of blending in, these buildings were designed to stand out and tell a story. Think bold shapes, vibrant colors, and surprising details that make you stop and look twice. Across the United States, cities began to transform. Corporate headquarters, museums, and even public plazas burst onto the scene with a newfound sense of expression and personality. Philip Johnson's AT&T building in New York, with its famous Chippendale top, became a landmark of the movement. It looked like a skyscraper wearing a piece of antique furniture, a perfect example of postmodern living. Michael Graves' Portland building in Oregon was another icon, using color, small windows, and decorative motifs in a way that directly challenged modernist principles. Architecture was no longer just about function, it was about communication. But it wasn't just about big, flashy statements. The late 20th century saw architecture become more diverse in other ways, too. New technologies and materials allowed architects to experiment with more complex and daring forms than ever before. At the same time, there was a growing desire for more human-centered design. Buildings became more accessible, and public spaces were designed to be more inviting and engaging. We also saw a new appreciation for the old. Instead of tearing down historic buildings to make way for new ones, the concepts of urban renewal and adaptive reuse gained huge momentum. Old warehouses were turned into trendy lofts, forgotten factories became vibrant art centers, and historic neighborhoods were revitalized. This approach blended the past with the present, creating rich, layered cityscapes that told a story of evolution, not just replacement. By the 1980s and 90s, there was no single, dominant style ruling American architecture. The landscape was pluralistic, a vibrant mix of different ideas. You had architects combining modern construction techniques with historical references, others drawing inspiration from regional traditions, and still others pushing the boundaries of pure creative expression. It was a messy, exciting, and incredibly creative time to be an architect. This era of postmodern and late 20th century design was a crucial turning point. It broke the rigid grip of modernism and reminded us that buildings can be more than just functional shells. They can be expressive, meaningful, and even a little bit playful. They can connect us to our history, reflect our culture, and enrich our daily lives. So the next time you see a building with a quirky shape or a splash of unexpected color, take a moment to appreciate it. It's part of a legacy that dared to bring fun back into architecture. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at architectural history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of design. See you in the next one. Chapter 8, ever walk past a building and think, what were they thinking? Maybe it had a giant, colorful arch or columns that didn't seem to hold anything up. Well, there's a good chance you were looking at a piece of postmodern architecture, a style that completely shook up the world of design. To understand it, we need to rewind a bit. Imagine the mid-20th century. Modernism was king. Think sleek, glass and steel boxes, minimalist designs, and a strict form follows function rule. It was all about efficiency and universal appeal. For a while, this felt like the future. But by the 1970s, a lot of people started to feel that these buildings were, well, a little boring, cold, impersonal, and honestly, pretty repetitive. City skylines were becoming seas of identical glass towers. Was this really the best we could do? A group of rebellious architects and thinkers said, no way. They believed architecture could be more than just a functional box. It could tell a story, make you laugh, and connect with history. And just like that, postmodernism was born. It was a direct response to the rigid rules of modernism. Instead of rejecting the past, postmodern architects dove right into it. They started borrowing elements from classical architecture, columns, arches, and grand facades, but with a playful, almost ironic twist. Think of it like a DJ sampling old songs to create something new and exciting. Postmodernists took historical forms and remixed them for the modern world. They weren't trying to make exact copies of Roman temples. They were reinterpreting them, often in exaggerated and colorful ways. Suddenly, bright colors, quirky shapes, and decorative details were back in style. The goal was to create buildings that had personality and communicated meaning. They rejected the idea of a one-size-fits-all design and instead celebrated individuality and local character. One of the most famous examples is the AT&T building in New York City, now the Sony building, designed by Philip Johnson. It's a modern skyscraper, but right at the top, it has a massive, broken pediment, which looks like a giant piece of antique furniture. It was bold, it was controversial, and it perfectly captured the spirit of postmodernism. Another great example is the Portland building in Oregon by Michael Graves. It's covered in color, decorative garlands, and symbolic imagery. It was a complete departure from the sterile office buildings of the time. This new approach wasn't just about looks. It was about connecting with people on a human level. While modernism often felt monumental and imposing, postmodernism aimed to be more approachable and engaging. Cities across America started seeing these vibrant, expressive buildings pop up. Corporate headquarters, museums, and even public plazas got a dose of postmodern fun. Architecture became a conversation starter again. At the same time, technology was advancing, allowing for even more experimental forms and structures. And as society changed, there was a growing desire for designs that were more inclusive, accessible, and in tune with their surroundings. This led to a boom in urban renewal projects and the adaptive reuse of old buildings. Instead of tearing everything down to build something new, architects began blending history with contemporary needs, creating a rich, layered urban fabric. By the 1980s and 90s, the idea of a single, dominant architectural style was gone. The landscape had become pluralistic, a vibrant mix of modern techniques, historical references, regional flavors, and pure creative expression. Postmodernism and other late 20th century movements didn't just give us some interesting-looking buildings. They fundamentally changed the conversation about what architecture could be. They challenged the status quo and reminded us that our built environment can be functional, sure, but it can also be expressive, meaningful, and even a little bit playful. So the next time you see a building that makes you smile or scratch your head, take a closer look. It might just be a piece of architectural rebellion, a monument to the idea that our cities should be as diverse and interesting as the people who live in them. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into architectural history, be sure to like and subscribe for more. See you next time. Have you ever looked at a building and wondered what story it tells? From the ancient earth lodges of the Great Plains to the glittering skyscrapers of New York City, American architecture is a sprawling, epic tale written in brick, steel, and glass. It's a story of a nation constantly reinventing itself, and today, we're going to journey through its most fascinating chapters. Our story begins long before the first European settlers arrived. Indigenous peoples across the continent were the original American architects. Think of the intricate multi-story cliff dwellings of the ancestral pueblos in the southwest, or the communal longhouses of the Iroquois in the northeast. These weren't just shelters. They were masterpieces of sustainable design, built in perfect harmony with the natural landscape, using local materials to create communities that thrived for centuries. They understood the land in a way that modern architects are only now beginning to rediscover. Then, with the arrival of colonists, the architectural language began to change. In New England, you see the simple, sturdy forms of colonial-style homes, reflecting a pragmatic and puritanical worldview. Further south, in places like Virginia, the grand Georgian manors with their symmetrical facades and classical details spoke of wealth, order, and a connection to British heritage. After the Revolution, the federal style emerged. Inspired by the newly discovered ruins of Pompeii and the ideals of the Roman Republic, architects like Thomas Jefferson used columns, domes, and elegant proportions to symbolize the democratic aspirations of the young United States. The 19th century was an era of explosive growth and unbridled optimism, and the architecture reflected it. The Industrial Revolution brought new materials and mass production, leading to the ornate and eclectic Victorian styles. Think of San Francisco's painted ladies with their elaborate trim, bay windows, and vibrant colors. It was an age of individualism, where every house on the street could have its own unique personality. From Gothic revival churches reaching for the heavens to Italianate mansions dripping with decorative brackets, this period celebrated ornament and historical fantasy like never before. It was a time to show off, and buildings were the ultimate status symbol. But as cities grew taller, a new kind of building was needed. The late 19th and early 20th centuries gave birth to the skyscraper, a uniquely American invention. Architects in Chicago and New York, like Louis Sullivan and later, the team behind the Empire State Building, raced to the sky. These steel-framed giants, often adorned with Art Deco details, became powerful symbols of corporate power, technological prowess, and American ambition. They fundamentally changed the silhouette of the city and our very idea of what was possible. For the first time, architecture wasn't just on the land, it was conquering the sky. After the World Wars, a dramatic shift occurred. The pendulum swung from ornamentation to pure function with the rise of modernism and the international style. Architects like Mies van der Rohe declared, "Less is more," stripping buildings down to their essential elements of glass, steel, and concrete. You see this in the sleek, minimalist glass boxes that came to define corporate America. The focus was on efficiency, honesty of materials, and creating universal spaces for a modern age. While some found it cold, modernism's influence was profound, shaping everything from suburban homes to entire city grids. But what happens when less is more starts to feel like just less? By the 1970s and 80s, a reaction set in. Postmodernism burst onto the scene, reintroducing color, ornament, and historical references, often in a playful or ironic way. Architects like Michael Graves and Philip Johnson decided buildings could have a sense of humor. They put giant classical columns on modern buildings and used unexpected shapes and bold colors. Postmodernism reminded us that architecture can be expressive, communicative, and even a little bit weird, breaking the rigid rules of modernism. And that brings us to today. Contemporary American architecture is a fascinating mix of everything that came before, supercharged with new technology and a pressing awareness of our planet's health. We see starchitects creating sculptural masterpieces that defy gravity, but we also see a powerful movement towards green building. Sustainable design isn't a niche anymore, it's essential. Architects are using recycled materials, designing for energy efficiency, and incorporating living green walls and roofs. Today's best buildings are not just beautiful and functional. They're smart, responsible, and aim to connect us back to nature, bringing the story of American architecture full circle. From an ancient earth lodge to a futuristic green skyscraper, every building is a chapter in the ongoing story of America. It's a mirror reflecting our values, our dreams, and our ever-changing society. So next time you walk down the street, look up. The story is all around you, still being written, one building at a time. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through time, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories hidden in plain sight.